Chapter 5 is going to focus in on selecting topic and purpose. Before we get into Chapter 5, just a couple quick reminders. First and foremost, please make sure that you're taking notes, as this will become your study guide both for the test and for the comprehensive final at the end. Additionally, please make sure that you read Chapter 5, and you should be able to define and apply the key terms in the chapter upon reading. And additionally, you should be able to answer the questions at the end of Chapter 5. So with that said, let's take a look at Chapter 5, Selecting Topic and Purpose. So with any sort of project, speech, presentation, you have to begin by generating your topic. And we do this just through brainstorming. And there's a litany of ways to go about this. Most of you have experienced brainstorming before, but brainstorming is just simply generating an idea by free association. So whether that's making lists, answering questions, thinking, whatever that happens to be. So in order for us to have a successful presentation, we need to make sure that the topic we select is interesting in itself and to our audience. So let's take a look at an example of an interesting topic.
What do Google, Disney, and Frito-Lay have in common? They're all using the cutting-edge techniques of neuromarketing to help sell their products. Neuromarketing is a new field of market research. An article in the New York Times explains that it uses techniques from neuroscience to analyze people's responses to products and promotions. By hooking you up to brainwave sensors, eye-tracking devices, and other high-tech equipment, neuromarketers hope to measure your subconscious interest in various products. They then use that information to create more persuasive advertising campaigns, what one neuromarketer calls the whispers of the brain.
So as we get through the brainstorming process, we've selected our topic. We need to begin to then structure the topic, the speech, the presentation. So we're going to go through a process of how that happens, and we're going to start by looking at big picture, getting a little smaller, and getting a little more focused. So up first, there is the idea of a general purpose, and this is just the broad goal of the speech. The general purpose is either going to be to inform, to demonstrate, or to persuade. Those are the three major type of speeches that we deliver in the class. So those are the three primary general purposes: to inform, to demonstrate, to persuade. So once you have your general purpose, then we get a little bit more focused on our specific purpose. So our specific purpose is a single infinite phrase. It states what the speaker hopes to accomplish. So if we take our three general purposes, to inform, to demonstrate, and persuade, and we make those more specific into a single infinite phrase, we might start out with first, today I'm going to inform you about the history of NASCAR. Or, today I'm going to demonstrate to you the 12 steps in making chocolate chip cookies. Or, today I'm going to persuade you to recycle and not buy styrofoam. So when drafting your specific purpose, a lot of times we compare this to the thesis statement of our writing that we do. So some guidelines to think about. First, it needs to be a full infinite phrase. It needs to be a statement, not a question, and avoid figurative language. So as we go through this list and then continue on to the next slide for additional guidelines, we will break down each one of these guidelines to provide an example of an ineffective, and then we're going to transcribe that to make it more effective. So some guidelines on the first slide here: full infinite phrase, statement, not a question, and avoid figurative language. Wrapping up the guidelines, we wanted to limit to one distinct idea, and we also want to avoid being vague. So like I mentioned before, we're going to take a look at each one of these guidelines, and we're going to show you a bad or poor example, and then we're going to correct it to make it better and more appropriate. So up first is the full infinite phrase. 3D technology. There's not a whole lot to go with here, and it's very broad, and it's not an infinite sentence. It's just a concept. So to make that more appropriate and better defined, we will rewrite it to say, to inform my audience about the three major kinds of current 3D technology. So our takeaway with the audience is that first, they know we're going to be talking about 3D technology. They also know that we're going to be talking about three different types, and those three different types will then become our main points. Moving down our guidelines, we come up to the second one, statement, not a question. What is Dios de Lamoras? And then we make that more correct by further defining and expanding. Our third guideline has to do with avoiding figurative language. So with our ineffective example here, I'm going to persuade my audience that campus policy on student parking really stinks. So we are very figurative in this. Are we talking about the availability, or are we actually talking about the sense? We walk into the student parking lot and it really does bother our nose. So to make that less figurative and more concrete, we would rewrite to say, to persuade my audience that the campus policy on student parking should be revised to provide more spaces for students before 5 p.m. So we refocused on the actual problem. The next guideline that we are going to take a look at is one distinct idea. So our ineffective example, to persuade my audience to become literacy tutors and to donate time to the Special Olympics. Both of these are very meritable causes, but we have two diverging ideas. So we need to go ahead and rethink, rewrite this to one distinct idea. So what we need to do is choose one or the other. So first, we're going to take a look at to persuade my audience to become literacy tutors, and that'll be our presentation from then on. Or we will take on the second portion, to persuade my audience to donate time to Special Olympics. The final guideline that we're going to take a look at has to do with avoid being vague. To persuade my audience that something should be done about unsafe school buses. So what makes the buses unsafe? How should we fix it? We don't have a lot of information to go on. So to make that less vague and more concrete, we would rewrite it to say, to persuade my audience that the federal government should impose stronger safety standards for school buses in the United States. So we have our general purpose, to inform, to demonstrate, persuade, and then our specific purpose, which gets a little more focused, to inform about NASCAR, to demonstrate the 12 steps in making cookies, persuade my audience to recycle. So while we're thinking about our specific purpose, we need to ask ourselves a series of questions. that first question that we want to go ahead and ask is, does it meet the requirements of the assignment? Can I accomplish the speech and presentation in the time allotted? Is it going to be relevant to the audience? Is it going to be too trivial for the audience? Too basic, too boring? Or is it going to be too technical to the audience? Something that requires an additional level of understanding that our current audience doesn't have. So we're going to go ahead and get a little deeper in the focus of our speech presentation. We talked about our general purpose: to inform, to persuade, to demonstrate. And then we added on our specific purpose. Next, we get to our central idea. And our central idea is a one-sentence statement, and it encapsulates the major ideas of the speech. So this is where we bring in our main points to our introduction, to our body, to our conclusion. So if I take my first topic of to inform, and then I went to inform about NASCAR, with our central idea, I take it one step further, and I say, today I'm going to inform you about NASCAR, specifically its history, sponsorships, and famous drivers. So some guidelines to think about with your central idea. We want to go ahead and express as a full sentence. We do not want to express it as a question. We want to avoid figurative language, and we also want to make sure that we're not being vague. So up first, we're going to go ahead and take a look at an example central idea, and then we'll go ahead and take a look at some ineffective and more effective examples using our 4 guidelines. So up first is going to be our video on phrasing the central idea.
Imagine an 8-year-old boy who never speaks or smiles, or a cognitively disabled man who has few friends but no one to talk to, or an elderly woman in poor health who does nothing but complain about her ailments. These are just a few people that I have seen helped by music therapy. All of them were able to come out of themselves, forget their problems, and interact with other people, if only for a few minutes, because of music. For the past 4 years, I've been part of a jazz ensemble that performs in mental hospitals, nursing homes, and residences for disabled adults. Although I'm not a mental health professional, my volunteer work has shown me that music therapy does improve patients' lives. I'd like to share some of my experiences with you today, and describe some common methods used for music therapy. Finally, I'll briefly explain some theories about why music therapy is so effective.
As we mentioned before, our 4 guidelines for the central idea. We're going to go ahead and take a look at each one of those again and look at an ineffective and more effective example. So up first is going to be expressing as a full sentence. So our ineffective example or poor example, problems of fad diets. To make that more complete in an entire sentence, we will expand, rewrite, and elaborate to, although fad diets produce quick weight loss, they can lead to serious health problems by creating deficiencies in vitamins and minerals and by breaking down muscle tissue as well as fat. So our second guideline is going to go ahead and focus on using a statement rather than a question. So up first is our ineffective example. What are nanorobots? That's a great question. Let's go ahead and rewrite that and make it into a statement and not a question. Microscopic in size, nanorobots are being developed for use in medicine, weaponry, and daily lives. Our third guideline has to focus on avoiding figurative language. So an ineffective example, Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula is an awesome place for a vacation. How do we define what makes something awesome? Everybody's perspective is different. Maybe it's awesome because it's cheap. Maybe it's awesome because it's exclusive. It all depends on the individuals. So we need to take that figurative language and rewrite to where we have Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula has many attractions for vacationers, including a warm climate, excellent food, and extensive Mayan ruins. Our final category to take a look at here when it comes to central idea is avoid being vague. Paying college athletes a monthly salary is a good idea. To make that more concrete and less vague, we would rewrite and expand to, because college athletes and revenue-producing sports such as football and basketball generate millions of dollars in revenue for their schools, the NCAA should allow athletes to receive a $300 monthly salary as part of their scholarships. So when we bring this all together, we'll go ahead and kind of look at a sample outline of what that's going to look like. So we're going to use the topic of alpine skiing. So our general purpose is to inform. Our specific purpose, which builds off of the general, to inform my audience of the three major races in alpine skiing. The central idea focuses even further, building off of the specific purpose. The three major races in alpine skiing are the downhill, slalom, and giant slalom. And from that central idea, we then stretch into the body of the speech, where we would talk about our three main points. The first major race in alpine skiing is the downhill. The second major race in alpine skiing is the slalom. And the third major race in alpine skiing is the giant slalom. So as we wrap up with Chapter 5, selecting our topic and purpose, just a couple quick reminders. Hopefully you've taken some notes as we've gone through this presentation, as this will become your study guide for both the test and for the final. Please make sure that you read the chapter, and after the reading of the chapter, you should be able to define the key terms in Chapter 5, as well as answer the questions at the end of Chapter 5.